We have Lisa Mallory and Bill Finger, who are here with their Halfway to Heaven Mustang Rescue, and also Lisa and Bill have been on our team to bring the festival here to South Carolina. So we're going to let them talk a little bit about Mustangs in South Carolina.
You go first.
He wants me to go first. Let me know if you can't hear me, because I have a bad habit of moving this microphone slowly away from my face as I talk. So I'm Lisa Mallory, just like Lisa Dearson said. My husband and I have a small Mustang Rescue here in Aiken, South Carolina. It is called Halfway to Heaven Mustang Rescue. And our goal for our Mustang Rescue is to help find homes for Mustangs in need. There is a huge need for Mustangs, the wild Mustangs of the Great American West, to find adoptive homes all over this country. But out in the east, on the East Coast, there are much more opportunities in my mind than there may be in the West right now. The West is possibly a little saturated with Mustangs, and many people out there have adopted a Mustang already. We have people in the East who don't even know that there's an issue with wild American Mustangs, and one of our goals is to teach them about these issues and help them learn how to adopt a wild horse. So we're going to be talking about Mustangs in North and South Carolina. It's kind of a small topic to talk about, but hopefully we'll have some big things to say. One of the things I would like to do right before we get into this is, with our rescue, I want to say that we have the most wonderful volunteers. We could not do this without them. And we've been talking about how Mustangs and other horses help people with mental health, all kinds of mental health issues. The horses are there for people. We're starting to see much more equines, many more equines used in the mental health area. And our volunteers help us have great mental health by helping us with our horses. So one of the things that I want to talk about, and maybe I'll ask Bill here, do you have anything else to add quickly about our rescue before we get going?
Yeah, I'll just say that our rescue we have 7 Mustangs and 2 domestic horses, and our domestics are not the kind of horses that you see right here with the yearlings. Ours came from different backgrounds. We have an abuse case, we have a neglect case, we have some other horses that just didn't fit in, that needed to be rehomed. And so our horses come to us with a little bit of sometimes a negative start. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But we don't really see a lot of zero horses. We start from behind zero with our guys.
I think you might have said with our domestic horses, but you're talking about our Mustangs. And what he means from behind zero is oftentimes it's much easier to gentle a completely wild animal than it is to take an animal that has already had some work done and that work failed. It's much more difficult, and we do deal with a lot of those types of horses, and they need the gentling again and the love, just like the real wild ones do. So talking about North and South Carolina, we do have the ability to get American Mustangs out in the north on the East Coast. It's a little bit more difficult than it is to get horses out west. The American Mustangs are on public land in 10 western states. We do have wild horses in North and South Carolina, up and down the coastline. I have not studied them. I don't know as much about them as I would like to know. We do have a woman here at the summit named Ginger Hip, and she brought her Carolina Marsh Tacky. So if there's anyone out there that wants to learn more about the Carolina Marsh Tacky or the other wild horses in the North and South Carolina coast, go down and talk to Ginger. She's doing a demonstration
4:30?
at 4:30 this afternoon. So we're really talking about the wild Mustangs of the American West.
Don't forget the Chincoteague ponies are wild ponies.
And yes, all up and down the East Coast, there's Chincoteague ponies, absolutely wonderful ponies that Ginger Hip, I think, will know more about than Bill and I do. So in North and South Carolina, there are ways to get
Can I
a Mustang.
interrupt you,
Yes,
Sarah?
sir.
I just wanted to follow up on that. And when I looked at Ginger's horse, she has a lot of the genetic characteristics that our sulfur mare does, a lot of the prehistoric horse characteristics, striped legs, spider webbing on the forehead, dorsal stripe,
And the Tigers.
yeah,
And the
the tigers
tigers.
too, right. But these horses have a lot of the similar DNA and genetic characteristics from the Spanish colonial horses. Whereas a lot of the other Mustangs are a broader mix, and Brian Smith went into great detail on that with the big mix in the DNA.
The
But
genetics.
some of the horses have more traditional historical colonial Spanish colonial DNA, and I was surprised to see the Marsh Tacky, how closely she resembled our sulfur horse.
That's from Utah. So our
Yeah,
Sulphur
Utah.
Mustang is from Utah, and to see this Marsh Tacky horse and see the similarities in their phenotype and what they look like was amazing. But I know they've also done some genetic research, and there's genetic ties there, which is really amazing. In North and South Carolina, we have adoption events. If you don't know about Mustangs, the Bureau of Land Management is our governmental organization that is in charge of the Mustangs that are in the American West in 10 states. The Mustangs are divided by the Bureau of Land Management into what we call herd management areas. These are areas that are governed by the BLM where the wild Mustangs live. And the BLM will gather the horses. It used to be called roundups, but we need to be a little bit more up to date, and we call it gathering now. So they'll gather the Mustangs off the range, and my husband and I, just to let you know, my husband and I don't deal with on-the-range issues. There's so much that you can get caught up in, and there's advocacy groups for those Mustangs. There's advocacy groups that follow those Mustangs that are free and wild on the range and advocate for them. The side of that my husband and I do is working on, once those Mustangs are gathered, how can we take them and get them out into adoptive homes? So the way that the BLM helps to get the horses adopted is, one of the ways is called an adoption event. So an adoption event is where the Bureau of Land Management will take a load of horses, probably around 80 or so. Some of them may be horses and some of them may be burros, BLM burros, and they bring them to different states. And if you want to talk a little bit about adoption events, Bill can tell you a little bit about them. And I will say that in South Carolina, they normally have one adoption event a year where the BLM brings horses in. And that is normally in West Columbia, South Carolina, every summer. And in North Carolina, there is an event outside of Charlotte in Monroe, North Carolina. And Bill, if you want to tell us like what happens at an adoption event and how people go about the process, that'd be great.
Are they doing? So when we did one adoption event with our first Mustang, and back then you would go to the adoption event and you could basically pick it out and it was first come, first served. Now, most of them are auctions, kind of like what we're doing here with the yearlings. And so you go to the adoption event and you can see the horse. If it's online, you can see it online, but if you go to the event, you can see the horse and pick out which one. You do have to be approved by the BLM. There are certain requirements that you have the appropriate amount of space, and for yearlings, it's a 5-foot corral panel containment area, and for adult horses, it's a 6-foot corral panel that you use. And the BLM actually owns the horse for the first year, and at the end of the year, you apply for, and after a vet check, and BLM determines that that horse is in good shape, then you are sent a title, and then you actually own the horse. But the BLM does keep ownership of the horse for the first year. There is an exception to that, and that's with the sales authority horses. And I think Reese over here, the bay, I think Reese is a sales authority horse. So if the horse goes to 3 events and is not adopted, the BLM will offer them as a sales authority horse, and I think that's the case more or less with the yearlings we have here. So there's no waiting for a year to get a title, but in that case, you own the horse outright from that point. And what else do we need to say about that?
That's what we did here.
Yeah, that's what we did here.
Exactly, right, don't.
Yeah, they're not going to be owned by the BLM. They'll be owned by the adopter immediately.
So at the adoption events, you pick out your horse, you normally, and this is what they're doing out east. I don't know what they're doing out west, but out east, you pick out the horse that you love, and they have, before the actual, like, standing in line and handing in your paperwork and getting approved, they'll have a BLM representative that will go to each pen. There's usually about 6 pens. They divide the horses up by age and sex, and that BLM rep will go to each pen and they'll say the tag number of each horse, how many people want this horse. If more than one person raises their hand, then there's an auction between those 2 people. Any horse that's not wanted by more than 2, you just get in line, you sign your paperwork, the BLM approves you, you load the horse on a trailer, and off you go. So there are in-person adoption events, and I think Bill said something about the other way, which is an internet adoption event. Go on the internet, you look for a horse, you decide that you'd like one, and you put your application in online, and then you bid. So the horses normally start out at $125. If no one else is interested in that horse and you put that bid in, you get to bring it home. And there's there's one great way to bring that horse home, and this is how we can get a lot of horses out east. If they're bid on an online auction and you win, the BLM offers to bring these horses to different in-person adoption events all around the country. So for us, in one case, we adopted a horse from the online event. Well, actually, that wasn't the case. Someone else adopted a horse from the online event. That horse was delivered to Ocala, Florida, where there was an in-person adoption event. Well, the person that won that bid never showed up to pick him up. So we ended up with that horse. But you can bid online, and then the BLM will send them to Ocala or West Columbia, South Carolina, or Monroe, North Carolina, whatever month that event is in. So you can bid online and you can get a horse out east that way. The other way to get a horse in North or South Carolina is to just look online or find a private person who has a Mustang for sale and buy that Mustang. If the Mustang is still under an adoption contract with the BLM, you have to have that horse reassigned to you through the BLM. If the horse is already titled and owned by the person, they just sell you the horse. So working with private people is another way to get those horses here on the East Coast. And another
Adopt from rescues.
Oh, yes, adopt from rescues. There are quite a few rescues out east and several in North and South Carolina you can adopt from, including ours. Also, one of the things I wanted to say is I did an online poll and I asked, who is a Mustang trainer, specifically a Mustang trainer in North and South Carolina? And I had a huge response. So there are a lot of trainers who specifically work with Mustangs in North and South Carolina. I also know in Georgia, Florida, Virginia, there's a lot as well. So you can get a wild Mustang, and if you don't feel like you can do everything from the beginning to gentle that horse and bring them along, there are some very good trainers. One of the trainers, well, I will say right here at our Mustang Summit event, we have local trainers that are amazing. We have a woman named Nicola Bolt, and Nicola is well known all over the Southeast for her wonderful Mustang training. She's located right here in Aiken. We have Rob West, who's a trainer, a Mustang trainer who lives just outside of Aiken. And we have Brian Smith, he's from Funny Farm Mustangs. He has a very extensive background with Mustangs. He is no longer taking horses for training, but boy, if you call up Brian Smith or contact him via Facebook, he's going to talk your ear off and give you any kind of advice that you ask for, and maybe some that you didn't ask for either, but he's very, very knowledgeable. So there are a lot of trainers. One of the trainers I will tell you about is a woman named Danielle Winkleman, who lives over in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. And Danielle trains her horses with a science-based method called positive reinforcement. And it's a method of horse training that maybe some of you have never heard about. It's science-based, it's science-backed, and it's the same way they would take a dolphin and teach him to put a basketball in a hoop, or a whale to allow someone to do a blood draw from his flipper. That's all positive reinforcement training. And Danielle focuses on that. She's a equine behaviorist over in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And Bill and I use positive reinforcement with all of our new Mustangs. We start gentling them right away with this method. And I'm going to let Bill talk to you a little bit about that method of positive reinforcement that we use.
Sure. When we start with the Mustangs, the first thing we do is try to get their trust. Because when we feel that if a horse doesn't trust you yet, training is going to backfire. So we always say trust before training. And we work very hard to get that trust, and we use positive reinforcement to get the trust. We do a lot of protected contact work with the wild horses before we go in.
Explain what that means.
So protected contact work would be, we may work on the outside of the pen and the horse is on the inside of the pen. There's a couple reasons for that. One is personal safety. Some of the horses we get have been abused, some have been neglected, and so it's very, it could be a dangerous situation. You don't want to get the horse hurt, you certainly don't want to get yourself hurt. So we'll work on the other side of the fence with the horse until they're totally comfortable. We'll still go in and clean and do things like that with them, but we don't actually try to work with them while we're inside at first. We even had a horse that came to us in January that was absolutely terrified of people. He was a neglect case, and we got him to the point he would lead from one of us being outside of a round pen and one being inside. We could get him to lead.
Or he was inside.
Yeah, he was inside and we were outside, but we could get him to lead
without a rope.
Without a rope, just at liberty. So he's already liberty trained to walk with us before we even entered the ring. And so some of that works really well. The positive reinforcement we use treats, we do. Timing and the amount of treats, the timing is very critical, how you do that. Lisa was a professional dog trainer that used positive reinforcement, so we applied a lot of our dog training skills. We did scent detection work with our dogs, and we apply a lot of that with the horse training, and it's worked very, very well with Mustangs. Do you want to go on a little bit on that?
I was just going to say, Bill mentioned about the protected contact with us working on the outside of the pen. It's not only for our safety, but the horses, especially the fearful, the ones that haven't been gentled, they're coming right out of the wild, they feel much safer when I'm outside of that pen or when Bill is outside of that pen than if we were inside of that pen. And we can do everything from outside that any other trainer can do from the inside, but we're out. And I'm big on safety. I've worked with thoroughbreds my whole life, so I know how horses can hurt you, and nothing against thoroughbreds. I adore them. I worked with racehorses. So that's another reason we like the protected contact. And a lot of people, when they hear positive reinforcement and they hear treat, they say, oh, the horse is going to start biting. Oh, the horse is going to start mugging me for treats. Oh, the horse just wants the food. Well, there's a big difference between bribing and reward, and it's based in science. So a reward is given after the horse does what we want. That reward tells the horse, let's do some more of this. He wants to do more of that because there's an appetitive stimulus, something that he likes, and he wants to repeat that behavior to get what he likes again. So we use the positive reinforcement, and as I said, it is a science-based method, and you can watch a couple videos and you can talk to a couple people. It's a little bit more difficult to learn than many other methods. So a lot of people start and they try it, and they end up with a horse that's trying to grab for treats, a horse that gets kind of nasty because they don't understand the concept of how this works. But if you do it correctly and you start from the ground up, the amount of time it takes is very quick, and the horses understand every piece of what you're teaching them. So we train and we gentle in 1/4-inch increments. And I can't remember which Mustanger was talking about this down there. It may have been
That was Brian
Smith talking about here, you know, in one session, we're trying to get this. We're not trying to get that in one session, in 1 month, in 1 year. We're trying to get this today. And this is success, because all those successes add up to this. And when we can train a horse and lay that foundation piece by piece by piece, that whole house is built like a brick, you know what. So when you start taking, and this part is our opinion, when you start taking a fearful or a wild animal and you start using scary, forceful, and aggressive methods on that horse, you're not teaching them anything but how to behave to avoid you. So if I'm chasing a horse in a round pen, I'm teaching him to be scared of me and to run away from me. So when he runs around enough and I quit chasing him, he's learned, okay, I can slow down, I can stop, but he hasn't learned to trust me. He hasn't learned why I want him to move around that round pen. He's just learned more fear. So we build our training on tiny, tiny steps so that in the end, when that horse is ready to go to an adoptive home, his foundation is so strong and so thick and so heavy that they're completely easy horses to train under saddle, to get on their back, Most of the times when we get on the back of our Mustangs for the first time, they have a halter on their neck, on their head. We might take a lead rope and put it over their neck and tie it to both sides so we have a like rein type of thing. It's kind of like a hackamore type, but it's just a halter and lead rope, and we get on them bareback. That's it. There's no big fanfare, and for us, pretty much 10 out of 10 times, those horses say, oh, you're up there today. Yep. Because we've laid such a big foundation.
I'm gonna talk about one of our training methods called A to B. A to B doesn't really mean anything in the horse world. It came into fruition because my name's Bill, and we had a dog named Arrow who was extremely reactive. And we found out that to train Arrow, it worked much better when he came to us as us going to him. And so what we did with our horses is apply the A to B method. So it not only with the protected contact concept, but even when we're inside of a training arena or training ring, the horse comes to us. We do not chase the horse, and
We do not approach the horse.
and we don't even approach the horse. Our last success story, Butterscotch, came to us completely terrified, and we use the word, "Are you ready?" And he knows when we say, "Are you ready?" He knows he's ready to train, and he'll walk right over to you, and he's ready to train. And that's the goal with us, is we want our horses to want to train. And when we get in the ring with them and they're ready to work, we just ask them, "Are you ready?" And their ears perk up and they look at us and they walk right over and they're ready to go. And when they walk away from us, it's like, okay, we're done. We do not force them to train. Everything is done voluntarily, and they can walk away at any particular time. But they like to, it's so funny, they like to train so much, sometimes they line up to train, which is fun.
Most of the time they line up.
Most of the time,
they line up to train.
But the A to B has been really important, especially for a fearful horse, because if he's coming to you to train, he's saying, I trust this person enough to where I can come in and work with them, as opposed to somebody chasing them around and having to submit. We don't do that. Our A to B works pretty well with that. And it's been very successful with 8 Mustangs so far. Well, 1's still in progress, but 7 so far.
So the A to B method, for an example, would be, I'll be on the outside of the round pen, and I have a horse that's never been touched by a human hand before. So I will use positive reinforcement to show that horse that if he looks at me, he gets a reward. That's what I want. If he looks at me and takes a step towards me, man, that's a great one. Gets another reward. So he's starting to engage with us, and if he doesn't look at me or he doesn't take a step towards me, we don't do anything. It's just, you missed a reward. It's like, no big deal. Who cares? But eventually, that horse wants to come because he's getting rewarded for being closer and closer. And then I'll put up my hand, and we will reward the horse for looking at my hand, for touching our hand, for moving their head a 1/4 inch to our hand, another 1/4 inch, another 1/4 inch. Then they'll eventually touch their nose to our hand. Yay, that's what we wanted. But all along the way, we teach it in 1/4 inch increments. Then we can teach the horse to hold up our hand. Can you touch your cheek to my hand? This is a horse that's never been touched. Oh, sure, Mom. I understand what this is. Let me put my cheek over. Can you touch your ear to my hand? Oh, sure, Mom. I'm a pretty wild horse, but I'll put my ear right in your hand. And we go do the whole body. And then when we decide to halter a horse, I can do a halter from protected contact. I can put the halter through that fence. I can hold the halter up, and I can teach the horse to self-halter. Come to me, put your head in that halter, let me put the halter over your ears and buckle it up. It's not me going in the pen walking around behind the horse, kind of being sneaky, walking up to him and trying to put the halter on. It's the total opposite of the horse coming to me. And it's all the same. Teaching a horse to pick up his feet. We teach him through positive reinforcement. Teaching a horse to move to the mounting block. I've taught the last one that we gentled from scratch, Butterscotch. We have never backed him yet. I haven't had a saddle on him yet, haven't had him that long, but he already knows how to move over to the mounting block because I taught him in the round pen to move over to the side and get a reward. So he knows how to move to the mounting block. So we use those principles to train our horses, and we've had such great success. And I want to say one more thing about the Mustangs, and this is not just the Mustangs in North and South Carolina. This is the Mustangs all over the country. We have such a passion, and that's another part of our rescue. We can stand and talk to people for days because we want the general public, even people with horses who have no idea what Mustangs represent. We want to tell you these horses deserve to be rescued. They deserve to be adopted. They deserve to be your companion for life. They can do anything that any other horse can do. You may not see a Mustang in the Olympics next week. You may never see a Mustang in the Olympics. But let me tell you, they can do lower level eventing. They can do amazing dressage. They can be a reining horse. They can be a polo pony. I know people that do youth polo. These horses are amazing. There's a lot of dressage people that can use these smaller Mustangs to get the youth going and get them started. Because in this horse world of today, it's expensive to own a horse. And if we don't get youth going in these different disciplines, we are not going to have horses in 40 or 50 years. They'll be phased out.
At the bottom already, there's 2 big horse shows that have had to cancel a bunch of dates because they don't have the upper level riders. If we do not build the bottom, people, we will not have a top.
Yes, Lisa Dearson just said that there's been a couple big horse shows that have had to cancel their dates this year in 2024. There's not enough participation, and she said that we need to get people in at the bottom levels so they can work their way up. So the horse sport and trail riding, it's not just competition, it's riding your horse out on the trail. So these things keep happening for ages and lifetimes. Mustangs are the horses that can do it. And one other thing that I want to say about Mustangs, and I'll turn it over to Bill, and I know our topic was North-South Carolina, but it's so much broader. It's so much broader. If you have never owned a Mustang, if you have any interest in a Mustang, there are so many ways that you can support the wild American Mustang. So every single one of us at this whole event, every one of us that's an American, we own the public lands in the United States. They're public lands, they belong to us. The horses on those public lands belong to us. They are American wild Mustangs. We have a say in what happens to those horses. Right now, the horses are fighting big battles. We have drought in the United States that causes the small amount of forage that's already on some herd management areas to go away, that causes the water to go away. So many Mustangs are being gathered up. We need to find homes for them, but the average person doesn't realize you own a horse. You have a say in what can happen to these wild Mustangs. Maybe you don't have a horse in your backyard. Maybe you don't have the financial ability to own a horse. Maybe you don't have the time. Maybe you don't have the desire. But these horses are ours, and you can help by donating, by just spreading the word, telling one person in your life, guess what? I learned today that there's wild Mustangs out west. They belong to us and they're in danger. So the one other thing, and I'll turn it over to my husband, but I have to say one thing, and that is, if you haven't had a wild Mustang before, give one a try. There's nothing like it. I have worked with horses my whole life. I love every animal except toads in this world. The horses I love from the time I was a kid, but the first Mustang I gentled and saw the look in that horse's eyes when she trusted me, when she trusted us, brought me to my knees, and it will bring you to your knees. They're different. They're no better than domestics. I have a couple domestics at home that I adore, but when they bond to that special person, it's something different than I've ever experienced.
Yeah, I'll have to say our first Mustang was supposed to be for Lisa, but Jewel decided that I was going to be her person. And Lisa's still not forgiven me for that one. But there is nothing like that when they decide that you're their person and they really trust you. One thing I want to say about, it's all horses, but Mustangs in particular, they are a herd animal, and one of the things that we insist on when we adopt horses out is that whoever gets that horse, they have other horses. We would never adopt a horse out to someone who didn't have any other horses, simply because our Mustangs we keep them in a herd, and they're used to being in a herd. They enjoy being with other horses, and that's the herd mentality that they have is a natural instinct for them. And they really enjoy it. One of the reasons we brought Bella and Rainey, the two Pintos over here, we brought them both, and because they like to be with each other, and we didn't want to bring just one horse, so we brought them both, so they could have company when they're here, and they're very comfortable with each other to do that. One of the things we've also learned with the Mustangs, and this is more related to South Carolina, is that we have 3 mares that we really can't even keep on grass during the summer. The grass quality here is not super high in sugar, but it's high enough to where they get too much sugar in their diet and they get fat. So we've got 3 mares at home, and fortunately we have 5 acres of woods that is fenced. And these girls live in the woods during the summer months. And they eat hay. We're giving them hay. But if they were out in the pasture, they could have founder, laminitis, and other issues associated with their weight. So we have to be careful with that. The Mustangs are very easy keepers at most of them. We feed them about 1/4 to 1/5 the amount that a thoroughbred eats. And we've got an off-the-track thoroughbred, so I can tell you every day when I mix their food, it's a shocking difference. The Mustangs eat very little. They've evolved to eat on sagebrush and very poor quality forage. And so when we have them, we have to be careful because they can get overweight very easily. But they are very easy keepers to have. The only issue that we have really in South Carolina is some of our horses. These are Western horses, and I'm getting one right in my face now, the gnats and the no-see-ums and the bugs. We have some allergies with our horses. We have some of our horses on Zyrtec and some other allergy meds because they do have some allergies here.
Not all of them.
No, we have two that do out of our 7 Mustangs. So, you want to?
Bill was talking a little bit about, the upkeep of Mustangs, and he did mention the food, and I will say he talked about, like, the Mustangs eat 1/5. Our Mustangs really, we don't grain them. We never feed them grain with sugar, ever, ever, ever. We feed them supplements that enhance the hay that they get to provide a balanced nutrition, and we take a handful of our Timothy pods to put in that supplement so they'll eat the supplement. That's all they get. And so when you're talking about 1/5 with the thoroughbred, my thoroughbred gets like 7 pounds twice a day, and you wet it and make it moist for them, and you can't even pick up the bucket. So.
They get half a pound
At the
if,
most.
If that.
If
yeah.
that, they get half a pound. And, you know, not every Mustang you get and bring it out east is gonna get a bug allergy, but it's something you could be prepared for, because many of them live in high altitudes, high desert. Some horses, some Mustangs, people will tell you can be a little bit, they can have a little bit of stranger danger, and I think a lot of that can be trained out, and I'm not sure if that's the word I want to use, but there are some Mustangs, the two we have here at the summit, one of them, if you open your horse trailer and you say, come on, she'll get in your horse trailer, she'll go home with you, and she'll love you from minute one, like you're hers. The other one we have over there, she's gonna look at you and say, who are you? I'm not getting in your horse trailer. And what vet are you? I haven't seen you before, and might get a little bit of a wild eye. So some are a little bit more worried about strange people, but with work, you can change that. So you can't, if you're a single person and you have 2 horses and you never see a friend or you never see a fellow horseman and no one ever comes to your house to work with your Mustang, it may be a little bit more difficult. We're lucky as a rescue. We have volunteers, we have people coming to tour the rescue, and our horses are exposed to so many people that pretty much they don't have stranger danger, except for the one that's here who, she is picky about her vet. That's about it, picky about her vet. She has a couple she loves and one that she doesn't. Yes, questions?
You're saying 2 horses, they need to be together like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, then, how about if you put a donkey with them, a llama with them?
Yes.
Would that help the situation?
Absolutely. So I think,
If any
There's
type of
burros
one-
that need to be adopted.
yes, there are BLM burros that need to be adopted that are gathered from the west. These little burros, the Bureau of Land Management says there's too many of them. Now burros eat nothing, and they hardly drink a thing,
Yeah.
but there's too many of them, so they gather the burros. And burros, they don't have to be a BLM burro, but the BLM burros are very deserving. And yes, a horse and a burro. Some of the race horses, they put a goat in with them. So you don't have to have 2 horses, but a horse has to have a companion, right?
And then you want to remember, because we had in Woodstock, we had one of our speakers. You have to remember that when you take that horse out riding, you got to get 2 burros because the burro needs.
So,
And that's how you get in trouble. And those burros are little, so they're okay. And we have a lot of BLM burros waiting to be adopted.
Lisa Dearson just said that, remember, if you get a BLM burro to go with your BLM Mustang, if you take your Mustang out for a trail ride, you've got to get another BLM burro to keep the one at the house company.
You're gonna burro in Iowa.
Yes, you'll hear that burro in Iowa screaming.
Oh, we can't take one horse out, the other one would have a
Right.
heart attack.
Yeah,
Right, but
yeah.
the burros are even worse. Keep adding, hear them miles and miles.
Yes, burros are loud. Ron?
Yeah, the burros that are through the Mustang adoption, do they have the freeze brand, and are they big enough to be ridden and have people ridden them?
That's a great question. So I don't know if everybody heard. Ron wants to know if the burros are big enough to be ridden, and do they have the freeze
They're-
brand?
Yes, they have a freeze brand, and some of them are larger. They're not all the same size. So some of them are pretty big, more like giant donkey size, and some of them are pretty small.
Has there been some success stories of them riding?
Yes.
Well, the San Fear took a mule stang, which is a burro and a Mustang, a wild mule stang, and they're like the unicorns of the Mustang world. So you can find mule stangs out there.
I've raised many donkeys and a henny. My first henny was born on my farm, and they're very intelligent and a lot different than a horse. And maybe one day I might go down at H and be the first person to break and ride and trail ride and video on a burro.
I've seen people riding burros before, and I've seen instances where people have trained their BLM burro to, well, definitely pack. There's a lot of people that
Mary
pack.
riding a burro?
Who was? Mary.
Mary riding a burro?
Yes, Mary was riding a burro on her way into Jerusalem, correct?
Yeah.
But I've also seen them trained to pull carts.
Yes.
So you can do a lot with the BLM burros.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Nancy?
Lisa, first of all, I just want to say I volunteer with these two, and they're amazing. I've learned so much from them, and she made me cry just now talking about when you see that trust with them, and she's got me on board with planning to get my next one, but I'm not ready. But what I wanted to say is if the two of you could talk more about, you mentioned about, I think you called it gathering now.
Yes.
Can you share with everyone about how many are in long-term holding?
Yes, and Lisa Dearson may be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that in 2024, we have nearly 80,000 horses that are wild.
Horses and burros that are wild.
Yes, horses and burros that are on the range wild. But there's two things that happen with the horses once they're gathered. Most of them, they attempt to put up for adoption. There's some that are 20 years old. There's some that have a bad knee. There are horses that aren't going to get adopted, and they'll go straight to what's called long-term holding. Long-term holding is a place that the government contracts with private ranchers to take the Mustangs in and care for them. The government pays so much per horse or burro per day. And Lisa, do you know the number of horses in short and long-term holding for us?
It's close to 70,000.
Yeah, I think it's between
It's close to 70,000,
65
but one
to
of the
70.
things that I like to push with our education program here is that it is not just BLM Mustang. We have Forest Service Mustangs.
Lisa, you should be on
And,
this.
no, that's
Okay.
We have Forest Service Mustangs, and we also have an astronomical number that you all probably won't believe, but there are 300,000 native reservation horses that are wild. So the BLM problem is here, and so wild horses, we also try to work to find homes for the res wild horses as well, depending on where we're doing our summit. We're gonna use Forest Service horses in Albuquerque. So the Forest Service and the reservation are very close. You don't know who's been to where, and the wild horses don't know borders. So I want you, before you're done,
Yes.
to point out our newest Mustang owner in the area and ask her a question as to why.
So before I'm done, I will do that. I do want to say one other thing to reply to Nancy. One of the proudest moments that I've had, I might even say in my life, one of the proudest moments is when I realized that some of my volunteers have enveloped that Mustang love, that have come to understand the plight of these Mustangs, and it's now their passion. And Nancy Williams is one of those women. And I also want to say that I have another friend who's been to my rescue and who helps my rescue out. Her name is Deborah Maffetone. And Deborah was the first woman at this Aiken Equus Film and Arts Fest and Mustang Summit to adopt one of the yearling babies. She did a buyout. She didn't even bid on this baby. She gave it the buyout price, and she is one of the luckiest women in the world right now. And we love her because I don't know. Deborah, tell me, how long ago did you learn about the plight of the Mustangs? From me. So what Bill and I are doing, it's a passion. And for us to have two other people learn about Mustangs, I don't care if it's 200, it's making a ripple.
How many a year? Is it 24,000 or 20 this year?
This year, I think it was 22,000 they gathered. Yeah, say that. Rainy.
So, but I have a horse now. I have a Jeep, and
Tally,
In this back corner. There, yeah, this corner. The corner on this side.
Oh, okay.
But it was really, I mean, I just went to the rescue a few times, I was talking to them, and just, I was like, these horses are amazing, and learning from about them, because I think, we all, but we all, look at Facebook, and we show their stories, and we see, some truth, a lot of not truth, and to learn from them, just to see what you guys do, and what, Lisa, what she does, it's just,
So I think we're gonna wrap up
Well, wait,
here
but just
unless
say the
there's
one
one
more
more,
thing.
oh, Bill has one more thing
one
to
more
say.
thing. Just wanted to make sure everybody knows, but it's about 22,000 horses a year are rounded up
This
by the
year.
BLM. I think it's 22,000 this year. So there's a great need for finding homes for these wonderful animals.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there ever a time where horses are taken out of the herd and then brought to this holding place, where they feel like the horse really is better off out in the herd and put them back?
I don't think, like behaviorally, they do that. What they will do is they'll gather herds, bring them in. There may be at times stallions or mares that they really feel need to go back out because of their genetic input for the herds. So usually, if they decide to return something that they've already gathered, it's something they think is going to provide really good genetics back to that herd. Thank you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you listening.